A vast feast lay upon the table. Baskets and fine pottery laden with tender cuts of meat, succulent fruits, and rich pastries. All untouched, all long since cold. Around the table, a stone hall, pillars cold and bare, reaching to a distant, arched ceiling. A room as cold as the feast. A figure entered, bare feet silent under long robes. She set a pitcher of wine on the table and stood a moment, listening. The clamor of the city had faded behind her as she climbed the hill to the temple. The wind slid against the stone walls. Hunger. The word she spoke died in silence. We call you, hunger. She stretched out her hands to the table. We summon you that you may be appeased. Her arms lifted to the ceiling, beseeching the stone. Come and be satisfied. She bent her head and prayed, certain that what she called would never come. Evening bells chimed in the distant city. Her arms fell to her sides. The table sat unchanged, the rich food tempting her empty stomach. In the morning, it would be tossed away, and the feast relaid. She turned back to the door, padding across the cold floor, but a faint whisper stopped her. A figure sat in shadow at the far corner of the table, a bent torso hunched between long, bony knees. You cannot be here, she said, stepping forward. Leave. Now. The hanging head turned. A yellow eye stared up at her. "Did you not call me?" a thin voice rasped. With quick steps, she returned to the table. "Only those of the temple may enter. Leave." The figure rose, bent and twisted. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin. It flexed gaunt hands, watching them curiously. "Why have you called me here?" I did not call you," she whispered. The yellow eyes turned to her. "You spoke my name, and I answered," it said, with pointed teeth. Hunger stood before her, immense and wasted. In fear, she sank to her knees. "Eat," she said timidly, extending her hands to the table. "This is what we have set for you." A skeletal hand touched one of the bowls. Meat fell like dust from the bone. The apples shriveled to their cores. Hunger plucked one up before tossing it disdainfully away. The bony head lifted, listening. "This place is not mine. I hear the cries of my followers in the streets, in the forgotten houses." "But you cannot," she cried. "We gave from our tables to appease you." It stared at her with sunken eyes, and her stomach twisted. Empty. Bones rattled against the stone floor as it walked past her. The shadow it cast was immense, blotting out the table. Like a wraith, the figure passed down the hill to the quiet city. In the silent temple, the food had rotted, and the smell of vinegar wafted from the pitchers of wine.
The music for today's episode was composed by John Jansen. Learn more about John at johnjansenmusic.com. Today's episode of Tiny Tales was written and narrated by R.E. Rule. Production and credits music by Frank Narat. If you enjoy our show, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per month to gain exclusive access to the Tiny Tales soundtracks. Visit us at tinytalespodcast.com for details. Thanks for listening.